Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe storms which are going to be impacting parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and then even into Arkansas and Louisiana into tomorrow. This is going to be mainly just for today, but there will be again a couple storms still lingering in for tomorrow morning and early afternoon. We have some of that warmer air to the north and west, and that should be creating a temperature differential with that chillier air to the south, and that big temperature differential is what's going to be fueling these storms, and originally that will be what creates these storms. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. As you can see, we have a few heat advisories in effect for parts of California, Oregon, and also for Washington, and that's in that orange color. And then we have excessive heat watches in that dark red for parts of Arizona, Nevada, and California, with excessive heat warnings in effect for parts of central and northern California. We have flood watches in effect currently for parts of Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. And other than that, we don't have many other watches or warnings currently in place. Yesterday we had a high temperature in Death Valley, California, where we got up to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low temperature was tied between Stanley, Idaho, where they got down to 22 degrees, and also 13 miles north of White Sulphur Springs, Montana, where they also got down to 22 degrees yesterday. Yesterday we had the highest rainfall report in Santee Coastal Reserve in South Carolina, where they got up to 2.76 inches of rainfall. Something really interesting happened where we actually had a lot of rain coming off the ocean, but then you go a little bit inland, and we actually didn't see too much in the way of rainfall. So you saw a couple inches right along the immediate coast, and then you go inland, and you really didn't see too much rainfall, especially in areas like the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast yesterday. So we had a bit of an interesting phenomenon take place over yesterday. Here is the total rainfall from that multi-day storm that we saw over parts of the Ohio Valley in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, and you can see anywhere in that purple, that's where we're above 2.25 inches of rainfall. So you can see we have quite a bit of rain, especially within this area right here, and we even have a few areas that are reporting over 3.5 to 4 inches of rainfall. So it was definitely a very damp and wet weekend, but you can see how once you go inland a little bit, we actually didn't see too much rainfall within these areas. So you go inland a little bit, not too much rainfall. The big bullseye was within areas from eastern Virginia all the way up into New England. So that was mainly the area that the storm targeted in terms of rainfall. We saw some isolated flooding, but it's going to stay a little bit drier over the next couple of days. So we should have time to dry out from all that rainfall that we saw over the past couple of days. Here's what the current Storm Prediction Center page looks like. As you can see, we have a marginal risk in effect for parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, with a slight risk in effect for parts of southwestern Texas and southeastern New Mexico. I don't think they will actually upgrade this too much. If they were to upgrade this, I would expect maybe a slight risk to be put in somewhere right in here, somewhere just northwest of Dallas. But it looks like it's going to be borderline. This is not going to be a huge event either way. So this is either going to be a marginal or a very weak slight risk type of event. It's going to be right on that border, and then the in parts of Wisconsin and Michigan as well, we also have a marginal risk in effect for a few thunderstorms this afternoon. And then if we look for Tuesday, you can see that we have a marginal risk in effect for parts of New Mexico and Texas, and then also another area in parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and eastern Texas as well. But that's when the storms should start to die out a little bit more, and we shouldn't be dealing with too much in the way of awfully severe weather by that point. That would be for Tuesday, which is tomorrow. Here would be the simulated radar, and this is showing you what we're expecting these storms to actually look like when we watch them on the radar. You can see that we're starting off with a few storms into parts of Oklahoma and Texas, and this kind of big batch of storms is just going to continue to head further southeastward, and eventually will become most severe probably as it heads through central Texas. So within this area right here is when it should strengthen to its peak. Before that, it should still be strengthening up to that peak level, and then after that mark, that's when it's going to start to decrease in strength a little bit more. That would be by right around 1 p.m. Central Time today. Here would be by 4 p.m. and you can see that we have in parts of northern Texas, southern Oklahoma, still a few thunderstorms rolling throughout those areas, and they are actually starting to get a little bit severe, especially into western Texas. Here would be by 7 p.m. Central Time, and you can see we still have these fairly severe storms into parts of northwestern Texas. And again, these are going to continue to strengthen and eventually drop off as they start to head into parts of eastern Texas. Then, as we go into later tonight, so this is around 10 p.m. Central Time, you can see that we're dealing with a rather strong line of storms into north central Texas. So, this is when they're hitting their peak right about now. We could maybe see one or two isolated tornadoes, although the bigger threat looks to be with hail and also damaging winds with this. So it's not looking to be a huge tornado threat, although definitely if you do get a tornado warning, make sure you're seeking shelter because we could definitely see one or two tornadoes here or there. It's definitely not out of the question. Here would be by 1 in the morning tomorrow, and you can see we have this line of storms, but it's now starting to weaken a little bit. And the reason that is because we have some chillier temperatures out further to the east. So that is one of the reasons. And it's also just because there isn't too much in the way of a strong warm front out ahead of this. So this is not an awfully strong center of storms. We don't have a big low pressure to the north that's bringing in a warm front and bringing in a lot of moisture or warm air. We're mainly dealing with borderline types of conditions. So we're dealing with maybe 1000 Cape, 1500 Cape, but it's nothing that's going to be off the wall or anything like that. So as it heads away from that prime zone and it heads into this area, it will start to weaken a little bit, and we're not going to have as much juice in the atmosphere to actually get it going back again. So again, this would be by 1 in the morning Central Time tomorrow. Here would be by 4 in the morning, and you can see we have these severe storms still rolling through, not even severe by this point. It's just mostly just some light rainfall in many of these areas. It's just steady rain for many of these places. So we're not really dealing with anything that's going to be too crazy as we head into the early morning hours of Tuesday. Then this would be by 7 in the morning, and you can see mostly just light rainfall. Nothing that's going to be too crazy or convective within these regions. Here's the total rainfall over the next day and a half, I would say. And you can see that we have some of those heavier amounts of rainfall into parts of Oklahoma and northern Texas. So this is the bullseye right here. And then you can see really where those storms start to drop off. The entire eastern part of Texas is not expecting a whole lot of rainfall. And that's because as it moved through the central part of Texas, it dropped off in intensity. And you can really see that depicted as you have those heavy amounts of rainfall or the decent amounts of rainfall into central Texas. And then as you head right into eastern Texas, they drastically are going to drop off. So we're going to see a big decrease in strength over the next 18 hours, I would say, between what we're going to be dealing with now and what we're going to be dealing with in just a few hours as it heads into eastern Texas. So it should start to weaken as it's heading over eastern Texas, and especially as it's into Louisiana and Arkansas. That's when it's going to be already fizzling out. We're not going to see too much more convective activity after that. If we look at the Cape numbers, these aren't staggering, but they are definitely enough to support a thunderstorm. We have Cape values between 1000 and about 2000, which definitely could support a thunderstorm. And there aren't anything that are that's too low. So definitely a thunderstorm is a possibility here, and these could definitely become semi-severe. You could see again one or two tornadoes, but the main threat would be hail and damaging winds. And you can see why it is going to drop off. If you go back into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, you're dealing with pretty much zero Cape in many of these areas. We have a chillier air mass into the southeast and the southern plains, so that is going to help weaken these storms, especially as they're heading further to the east. So that chilly air mass is really going to cool down the atmosphere. We're not going to have a lot more energy or instability as it's heading east of the Texas border. So that's again one of the reasons that this is going to start to weaken after heading into eastern Texas. If we look at the tornado parameter, you can see that, or the STP, you can see that we're dealing with the highest rates or the highest numbers here as you get closer to these actual supercells. So it looks like right into northern Texas is where we're going to be dealing with the highest risk of tornadoes. And again, the risk is actually very, very low at this point. But if there were going to be any area that's going to see tornadoes, it would be somewhere within right here. So this is the zone for today that I would say has the highest risk of seeing tornadoes. But again, I would think that's a very, very low chance, and I'm not expecting any big tornadoes or any big tornado outbreak out of this type of event. Here's the high temperatures, and you can see that we're dealing with temperatures getting up into the 80s over much of eastern Texas. So it definitely will be warm enough, but it is still actually a couple degrees below normal. So it is technically colder than normal in these areas, but still it is enough to support a thunderstorm or two. So that's definitely not going to be one of the issues. The dew points are going to be high enough, but they're not staggering like also like the K values. These aren't going to be off the wall type of numbers. They're going to be in the mid and upper 60s. So nothing like what we were seeing with previous events where we had much more severe activity. This is just going to be your standard type of thunderstorm that's going to go through in about 5 to 15 minutes, and then it should be out of here, and we shouldn't have many more issues right after that. And you can see dew points, especially into central and also eastern Texas, are going to be the highest, with dew points getting up above 65 degrees. Here's the precipitable water, which is basically how much moisture is in the column of the atmosphere, and you can see that we have the precipitable water amounts that are getting up between an inch and a half and about 2 inches in parts of northern Texas. So that is, again, that's going to be the bullseye for this event. It looks like somewhere right in here is going to be where we're going to be dealing with the most severe storms and probably the highest threat of hail and damaging winds as well. If we look at the wind gusts, the maximum wind gusts, these are going to be quite high, especially into western Texas. That's where we're going to be dealing with the highest threat of these damaging winds, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a huge threat. You can see you get further east and also north, we're not dealing with a huge threat, maybe gusting to 19 to 25 knots. So that's really not too much. That would be around 30 to 35 miles per hour, and that would be the peak. So nothing that's going to be too crazy or too extraordinary here. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.